my name is Amy McAllister. I'm an economist on the Middle East part of the global macro team here at Oxford Economics, and I use the global economic model on a day-to-day basis. So hopefully today I'll be able to pass on some of my knowledge to you. Thanks for joining our monthly model demo. Just for future reference for you, our next model demo is on the 22nd of January at 10 a.m. So if you're interested in seeing our list of events, we have it here on the website, if I can get to it. Up here on the events page, here you'll find the list of webinars, workshops, and any conferences that we have, and you can also sign up to them here. So that doesn't look like it wants to open for us, so I'll just show you another few handy things that we have on our website. So this page is the help page up here, and it's actually the important place for downloading the software and the data that are included in our model. So this is, if you go to the help using our model page, you can find the download link there. This is also sent out in an email once per month with the updated version of the forecast and things like that. Here there's also a link to our YouTube channel, which has a number of helpful videos. They go into the model functions in a bit more detail. There's a user guide here, and it's a PDF which goes into a lot more detail than what we will be covering today. I must say it's quite intense, so it's not one for the faint-hearted. And on this page there are also things like links to the help videos and documents for the data banks, and also the contact an economist page. So if you're looking on the model and you find that you have a particular question about a country or an industry or a variable that you've seen, going to this section should direct you to the right person to question on that. So moving on to the model, as I understand it, some of you may already be somewhat familiar with it, but I'll just give it a very basic introduction today, just for those that aren't. So I'll cover some of the background and the theoretical side, and then introduce you to the actual software and show you how to use the model to view and download data and to manipulate a forecast, and then give you a brief introduction into running simulations. So please feel free to stop me at any time if things aren't clear or you have any other questions. Okay, so a bit of information about the model. The Oxford Economics Global Model is the most widely used, commercially available international macro model because it can be used for a variety of activities such as corporate planning, risk management, stress testing, and even policy analysis. Our client base covers an entire spectrum. We have public sector entities, private enterprises, central banks, financial institutions, and think tanks. The actual model, it covers 47 economies in detail, including all of the advanced economies and the main emerging markets. So when I say that it covers them in detail, what I mean is that the macro model includes a specific country model for each of these economies. But we also provide headline forecasts for another 30 countries, and then there are a number of blocks and regions such as the Eurozone or OPEC, which you can also see. So a bit of the theoretical background. The economists among you might find this useful, but it's by no means imperative for using the model day to day, and it more underlines the theory upon which the model is built on. So it's already built in. So the behavioural equations in the model are theory-based relationships which describe the short and the long run behaviour of these variables. So the model is Keynesian in the short run and monetarist in the long run. In other words, in the short run, we would expect an increase in demand to initially lead to higher output and higher employment, but it will eventually feed through into higher wages and higher prices. So both monetary and fiscal policy are effective, so we expect to... Yes?
Yeah, are you changing your slides? Because I don't have any... I've just got the same... on my screen, all I've got is the help page.
Yeah. I'm just kind of talking about this at the minute, but I don't have any slides for this, so I'll move on to...
I wasn't sure whether I was missing something. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You continue. Okay, that's fine.
So as I said, so both monetary and fiscal policy are effective, so we would expect to see interest rates rise and demand fall again in the short run. But in the long run, output and employment are determined more by supply side factors, so things like labour supply and capital and total factor productivity. So to give another practical example of how the model works, we define exports as a function of things like world trade and competitiveness and various other things. So if I'm on a country model and I want to see the effect of increasing imports from other countries, the interlinkages that we have built into the model between trade variables and each of the different countries allows us to see the full effect. And it's not just trade variables that create these linkages, it's also things like commodity prices, interest rates and exchange rates, so we can get a full view of the impact. On your screen you should see the global model workstation, and it's made up of 4 main components. So the top left box here takes you directly to the global economic model. This is the software where you input shocks, you change forecasts, and you solve the model to see what happens. The top right box, labelled view and download data here, it's used to visualise the historic data and the forecasts and the scenarios. So it's a bit more user friendly, this one, in terms of you can chart particular series together to compare them, things like that. But I'll go through that in a bit more detail later. So the bottom left is used to generate comparison and summary tables. So if you prefer to see your output in terms of numbers instead of charts, things like that, that would be the place to go for that. And finally, the bottom right box is a list of predefined scenarios that we've created. So this is a fairly new feature, so you'll see that it's still beta version here. We won't really talk about this one as much today, but if you do find that you're interested in that, we can organise another session for you. So let's open up the global economic model by pressing launch here. This takes you to the front screen. It has a few different options, but we're interested here in running the model. And I'll ask you to navigate to a .db file, or a database file. This file contains all of the data and the forecasts, as well as other things like equations and residuals that you need to run the whole model. So these are refreshed every month, which is why you need to download the update from us. So pressing open, we're going to choose the November base because the December base hasn't been released yet. And we'll press open and it will take you to the main screen of the model. And as you can see, there are quite a few things happening here, so we'll just go through these and I'll tell you what each bit is doing. So the first thing to point out is this box at the top, which tells you the base or the .db file that you have opened. Every time you solve the model, it creates a new database file, which has any changes that you have made to the forecasts in it. So this could be useful if you make a change to the forecast and then decide you actually don't like it and would like to go back to the baseline. You would click change base and just choose your old base again. Also at the top on the left is this drop down list, which shows you all the countries that we cover. You'll notice that these aren't in directly alphabetical order. In fact, they have the main economies, so this is the the G7 excluding Canada but including China at the top. And then we also have a number of regions at the bottom. For economies that aren't included in the model, the regional aggregates often include some headline forecasts. So if you want to keep track of an economy but we don't particularly cover it in great detail, it can still be useful. So for example, if I was particularly interested in Cyprus, it's not one of the major economies we cover, but we can go to the EU regional aggregate and you'll find a measure for GDP in Cyprus. You'll also notice in this list that there is a world sector here at the bottom. This contains world aggregations for things like global GDP and global trade, and it also includes our forecasts for things like commodity prices and in particular our oil price forecast. So if we move to the next drop down list, we'll show it shows the variables that we provide for each of these countries. So as you'll see, each variable has its own mnemonic, which is just a few letters long, and then it has the description just next to it. Until you become a bit more familiar with these variable mnemonics, which you often pick it up quite quickly when you're using the model often, you can use this little button next to you, which just swaps around the display here. So instead of having the mnemonic then the description, it puts the description then the mnemonic, which makes it a bit easier to search for variables that you don't know the mnemonic for. So if I was going to search for the world oil price, it would come up instead of WPO. So different country models vary in size in terms of the number of variables that we actually include. The biggest ones, probably unsurprisingly, being the US and the UK. And often each country has a limited set of core variables. And then we have a larger set of periphery variables which are driven by these core variables. So the data, once you choose the variable that you want to see, the data is shown just below in the form of both a chart and a table of numbers. The black numbers here, or the dark blue line up here, are historic or confirmed data, and then the forecast line and the forecast numbers are both in red. We'll see that this base that I've opened actually shows us data from 1980 all the way up to 2025. This means that it is a 10-year base in that it gives us 10 years of the forecast. So you can also get a 5-year base and a 25-year base, but it depends on your subscription. So if we look at the graph first, you can move. There are a few handy keyboard shortcuts which can really save you time. So you can move left and right to change the years that the graph displays. So I'm just pressing the left and right arrows on my keyboard here. You can also add more years to the graph by pressing insert. So this is essentially zooming out a bit. And you can also take the years off by pressing delete. So this is the same as zooming in, really. Finally, if you want to see the chart a bit bigger, you can double click it to make it whole screen, and double click it just to send it back. And that's the same as just pressing this little chart button up here. So below the graph we have the numbers that relate to the forecast. These are displayed such that each column represents a year and each row represents a quarter. So below the level values we also have a total level, an average level, and also a percentage change for the year. So if you would prefer to view the data in a different form, you can use the third drop down list up here at the top. By default, the data are displayed in level terms, but this allows you to add various different transformations. For example, if I was looking at a CPI or an inflation variable, I would prefer to look at it using year-on-year percent changes rather than the level index value that you would see by default. There are also things like quarter-on-quarter percent change and the level difference between quarters and between years, so that's quite useful. The small button above this list here, that in very small writing says var and res, so it allows you to swap between the variable and the residual. So if we just look here, so this can be additive or a multiplicative residual depending on the equation. But I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute when we look at the actual equations for variables. So we'll just go back here. So at the top we have the name of the variable and also some extra information like the units and the currency at the end. If you'd like a bit more information, we have what we call help information, which you can get to by going to info at the top here, and then info on current variable. This will open up a new screen. So here it includes the metadata for the variable. So this is the historic source. So this is where the numbers in black come from, and it'll also include any information such as if the series is real or nominal, the units that it's in, the currency, the base year, and also if it's seasonally adjusted. It also shows you the equation just here, and then a list of the variables, the other variables on the model that one feeds into. So if we change our oil price forecast here, it's going to change the forecast for all of these variables as well. Again, not all of the variables feed into so many, but obviously the oil price is quite an important one for many of our forecasts. So if we look at the equation here, this shows us that the forecast is driven by an equation that has two parts. So here we have the equation, and here we have the residual. So this one's a multiplicative residual. The residual represents the difference between the calculation that the equation provides and the actual value over when we're looking at the history. When we're looking at the forecast, the residuals are set by the economists according to their judgment. So this information screen, it's particularly important because it tells us where the variable is coming from, how it's being calculated, and then where it's going to as well. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, so we'll move on to the manipulation of data. There are three main ways that you can use the model to change the forecast path of a variable. So firstly, you can click on a cell and manually type it in. So if you use Excel, it's very much like this. You just click on the cell here and just type it in with your keyboard. Like that. So this put in a $25 per barrel oil price for next year. Say I don't like that, I can just press cancel and it will take me back to my baseline. Second way to change the forecast is to use the chart. So click on the chart until you see this little arrow with two arrowheads pop up, and then you can drag it straight down. And say, obviously that doesn't make a particularly attractive chart, you can click here and use the control button on your keyboard and the left and right button, and it actually interpolates between the 2 points to smooth it in and make the decline a bit more gradual. As you can see, the new forecast line is in red and the old baseline forecast is in a very faint blue. So if I decided that I did like that forecast, I could press implement and it will come up with this box. The box that pops up asks if I want to change the fix on the years other than the forecast. So here at OE we use the term fix when we actually specify a forecast. So in other words, when we fix a variable down, it's telling the model to ignore the equation and the values that the equation are suggesting and put in the values that have been suggested by the user. When you solve the model, the forecast numbers will actually change from red to blue, just to remind you that this isn't what the model is telling you, it's what you've put in. So we'll see that in a minute when we solve the model. So let's just press yes for now. But, looking at that, actually, maybe I don't want that, so I'll press cancel again. And it'll ask me if I want to see the values, so the changed values, which will be the values that were on the model when I last pressed implement, or do I want to see the baseline values, or the values that were there before I touched it. So let's do that. And it takes us back to the original chart. So the third and final method for changing the path of the forecast is to use the specify changes function, which you'll see just up on the top right here. So for example, if I wanted to decrease the oil price by 25% next year, I would press specify changes for this box to pop up, and I have to fill in the dates. So the first box is the year and the second box is the quarter. So let's just do 2016 quarter 1 to 2016 quarter 4. And if I want to reduce it by 25%, I'll multiply by 0.75 and then press OK. So we'll just change the fix again, that's fine. And we'll see this is what it's done. So again, if I'm not sure about that, I can just smooth it in a bit more with the control and arrow keys there. I think this method's quite useful because it's quite an easy way of running shocks to the economy. So for example, if I want to reduce consumption expenditure by 10% and see the effect on the rest of the economy, it's quite an easy way to do it. It also saves you going into Excel and recalculating the numbers that you want to see each time. So if I was happy with that, I'd press implement again. But let's just go back and put a $25 forecast in for next year and just smooth it in again like we did for the first one with the control and arrow keys. And this time I'm going to go ahead and solve it. So I've decided that I'm completely happy with this forecast and I want to see the effect of what this will be on the rest of the economy. So I'll press solve. And this box pops up where I have a few options again. So firstly, it asks me for the time period. And this is the time period that we want to solve the model for, or solve the equations within the model. So if I put in from 2015 quarter 1 to 2020 quarter 4, I'm basically saying I'm not really interested in what is happening after 2020 quarter 4, so I don't need to solve to that point. And the fewer years that you have to solve, the quicker the model will solve. So at the bottom, you can choose the countries that you want to solve for. Again, if you untick a country, you're essentially saying, I'm not interested in what's happening here, so I'm not going to make the model solve it. And if you have fewer countries, it won't take as long to solve. So then you can change the name of the base here. So this is when you solve the model and it creates a new database file. What do you want it to be called? So I'm going to put it in as WPO, which is our mnemonic for the world oil price, and then 25, just to remind myself what we've done. So I'll press open. There's also this options button, which lets you choose even more options. I'd always recommend viewing the run file or browsing the run file before solving, as it says. So the run file is a record of the changes that you make in each solution of the model. So if we press OK and OK again, I can show you a run file. So this is the run file. So this is telling us that we have made a couple of changes to the world oil price. And each one will represent one time that we have pressed implement, but the last time that we have pressed implement will be the one that is the final one, essentially. I do understand that this can look like complete nonsense to a new user, and it's not the easiest to look at either. But you just need to know that this is where the technical information for the model is kept. And it's a good place if you want to check that you've definitely made the change that you thought you had, or to check that you haven't accidentally made a different change. It's mostly useful, to be honest, to pass back to us if you have any issues or problems with the model. If you can send us your run file, we can have a good guess at what's going on and offer you some advice for that. So here at the top it's telling me the name of the new base that will be created, then we have the changes. So I'm happy that looks quite sensible. So I'm just going to press the cross at the top here, and do I want to continue with the solution? Yes, I do. So you should get a little thing pop up at the bottom here, and if you open it up you'll see that this little black box appears. So this shows you how many iterations it takes for the model to reach equilibrium. It really shouldn't take more than a minute or two to solve, and like I said, if you're not solving for all of the countries across all of the years, it should be even quicker. So when that finishes, again we get another little pop-up box and we want to continue, and it takes us back to the main screen of the global economic model. So we need to run the model again, but this time we want to open our newly created base, which has all of our changes to the oil price in it, as well as any second round effects that this change has made to other countries and other variables. So let's navigate first to the variable that we actually changed. So world WPO. And you'll see that this is now blue up to 2019 Q2. So this means that from 2015 Q4 to 2019 Q2, we have put in our own forecast, and the model is ignoring what the equation is saying. And after that it's unfixed, so it is running off the equation after 2019 Q2. So yeah, essentially we've exogenized the world oil price forecast. And there are a few different ways that we can look at this change and see how it's fed through. So one option would be to open two models at the same time. And then, for example, if we looked at the US GDP, we could open one model with the old base and another model with the new base and compare them side by side. To be honest, this is quite a laborious process, probably not the most efficient either, and you have to really know what you're looking for. In my opinion, it's much easier to produce some difference tables. So if we go back to the global model workstation and we go to this section, which is generate results tables, and we launch it. So we want to say that we want to compare what was in our starting database, our starting November base, with our newly created WPO 25 base. So we'll open both of those, and by default, because we have put both of those bases in, it's automatically said, I'll give you a table that shows you the differences from your baseline scenario, which is what we want to see. We can then here choose the countries that we want to compare. So again, let's just stick with the United States for simplicity. And then here you can change if you want to see annual data or annual and quarterly data, and also change the time period that you want to see on the charts, or on the tables even. So because we only solved to 2020, let's just put 2020 in that box and press generate. So this generates a .tab file which should be easily opened in Notepad. So let's just do that. Okay, and here it gives you the main variables across the top here. And I think it's actually done it the wrong way round, so it's looked at the wrong base as a secondary base here. So these are the percent changes. So it's talking about the percent change between the level value between the starting base and the secondary base. It depends how you like to view your data really. Personally, I prefer to see them more in a chart format. I find them easier to compare. So let's close that down and go back to the model workstation and just launch this view and download data. So if you navigate to where you keep your model, this is automatically where the model will store the bases that you create, just in case you're looking for them. And you just highlight both bases here. So I highlighted both by pressing the control button while I click them and press open. Here at the bottom, you'll see the two bases that you've chosen. So we've got the WPO 25 base and also the November base. First option, the first box here, allows us to choose the countries that we're interested in. So again, for simplicity, let's just open it up, and choose the United States. So once you've chosen it, I'll get a little green tick next to it. So then we can select the variables that we wish to see. So in this second box, say I wanted to look for GDP or CPI, and I wasn't sure which box they came into. I could just type GDP at the top, select it here and press search. And you'll see again, it'll highlight in green. So if we just open up this tree, we can see that real GDP is now selected. So let's do the same thing for CPI and press search. and open the tree again, and you'll see that GDP remains ticked, but we've now also got CPI, or inflation. So the third box here, again, it's just changing the options on how you want to view the data and which years you want to see. So let's just change it to 2020 again, because that's where we solved it to. We'll leave it as annual, and you can change the precision and the, just the way that you see it. But let's just go to see results. So this automatically takes us to the chart of the data. Again, it's quite easy to see, but if you're looking at a lot of countries or a lot of variables at the same time, it's not the easiest to compare. So one easy way to do it is to just click the chart button at the top, and it will automatically plot all of the series that you had open in that previous screen. As you can see, because of the scales of the two variables, these don't make for a particularly pretty chart. So let's just change the chart content here, and we can untick GDP and just press update chart, and that's better. We can now compare what we've got. So in red is the forecast from our November base, or our starting baseline, and in blue is our forecast for consumer prices in the US when we have world oil prices at $25 a barrel in 2016. So if you just hover over the line with your mouse, it actually gives you pretty much the same information that you saw on the help information screen back on the global economic model. So it's quite useful if you don't want to kind of flick back and look at those kind of things. So here we can see that CPI in the US is lower all the way into the forecast. This is, I guess, will be partly due to the lower oil prices, but also due to the appreciation in the effective exchange rates, because the economy is growing at a faster pace. We can also see it's a permanent shock to the economy. So the forecast actually doesn't return to its baseline because of the supply side of the economy feeding through to relative fuel prices. So while we're here, we'll just point out another few useful tools on this screen. So if you wanted to run more than one scenario, so say you were looking at a $25 per barrel oil price, but you also wanted to see a $75 per barrel oil price, you could go back to the model, run in those changes, solve it to create a new base, and then press add to bring in another base down here and essentially add another line to the chart. You've got the edit button up here, which if you are on the chart will take you back to this selection page. So you can, if you decide that you want to view a different country or a different variable, you can just change it here. You can also save your selection. So if every month I want to see the changes in the US forecasts that OE provides for GDP and the expenditure components, I could choose the US here, choose the main variables that I want to see here, and then press save. Then when I come back every month and load in the new base, I can press open and choose my selection, and it will retick essentially all of the variables that you've chosen, and it saves you going back and reticking them all and searching for them. So it can be quite time saving. You can then download the data. So if you are somebody who is more comfortable playing and manipulating data when it's on Excel, or you have some charts set up and you just want to refresh the data every month, that's a good way to do that. There's a link to our website to take you back to your subscriptions, and there's a tour for the data services here if you want to look at this again. And finally, there's a definitions sheet, which, when it opens up, shows you a list of the mnemonics, a list of the shorter descriptions, and then a more detailed set of descriptions and definitions. So this is quite useful because if you're not particularly familiar with all of the mnemonics that you have, obviously it's quite easy to just search in this document and try and find the variable that you're looking for that way, or even if you're just looking for a bit more information on a variable and where we get it or how it's calculated. So that is it really for our simulation side of it. So we looked at opening a database file on the global economic model through the global model workstation, and we looked at the different ways of manipulating the forecast and ran a simple simulation. I'd say my advice would be to have a go and play around with the model. The more you use it, the more comfortable you get with where to find things and how to change things. And then if you do have any problems, do feel free to drop me an email and I'll see if I can help.